This ZeroNow program is brought to you with the support of our founding partners.
I'm just one person.
Determined
to bring us back to zero.
I'm just one person.
Determined
to bring us back to zero.
I am just one person.
Determined to bring us back to zero.
All right, thank you again, Chris, for joining us today and for doing this interview for ZeroNow. I wanted to start with a little bit about you and your background in law enforcement, and also how you got into specifically counterterrorism and thinking about active shooter prevention.
Yeah, those are good questions. I got out of the Marine Corps in 2000, and police was a pretty natural progression. And I went into the McKinney Police Department after a couple other departments trained me. And I have a background in SWAT, undercover narcotics, and supervising as a patrol officer. I ran my own few shifts, and I got into I'm actually a domestic terrorism person, right? So active shooters are the #1 form of domestic terrorism. And in 2007, I started running our active shooter branch at the police department. And in 2010, we had an active shooter happen in living color. 168 rounds came at us outside, and I was part of that response. And, we weren't in the prevention mode. We were more in preventing the loss of lives by a good response. And, I realized that was preposterous. Why let it start in the first place? So I was getting my master's degree at the University of Maryland and went and changed my discipline to the phenomenon of active shooters. And nobody really wanted to buy the program, meaning they didn't want to, put their name on that type of program. So I went shopping for a college that would do it, and the University of Phoenix did it. I was the 5th person, I think, maybe the 3rd, to write my capstone project in the phenomenon of active shooters, along with the experience of being in an active shooter. Right. So those are 2 unique categories, and I have them both. And now there's about 5 of us in the country. And we're like the legacy experts, thankfully, because we don't, we think of active shooters like they happen all the time. And while they do, they're just not, the numbers don't support the fear. So anyways, as a legacy expert, I retired and kind of walked away, and then the Parkland incident happened and I came back. So found some fatal flaws there, developed a new plan, and now I've developed something called PRO, which is the Active Shooter Prevention Project, the PRO model, the prevention, response, and options.
I think that part of the fear that you talk about that is so ubiquitous in our culture comes from the fact that it's so enigmatic, the phenomenon of active shooters. It's something that so many of us have a really hard time understanding. So as somebody who has studied this phenomenon and has spent a lot of time thinking about it, what can you tell the public, the lay people, that maybe we can't get from the media, but that might help us understand exactly what is causing this phenomenon and just help us understand better what the root cause is here?
So one of the misnomers with active shooters, I think there's 2 gigantic points that you make by happenstance. One would be the fear translates to the problem, that the problem is so grotesque and new. And the reality is the very first active shooter happened in 1764. And another one, where it took 10 lives and wounded 1. And then a few years later, a girl brought a flintlock pistol to school and shot her boyfriend and his 2 friends, or 3 friends. So you're talking the 1700s. 1800s had a few. 1927, the largest school massacre in history took place, called the Bath Massacre, and Bath Schoolhouse Massacre in 1927. And then, of course, we, kind of time and distance gets between us, and you get to the Texas Tower in 1966, or Columbine in 1999, and then we fast forward to Virginia Tech in 2007, and Sandy Hook comes in 2012. I mean, you see the problem with this, right? I'm discussing these points of, here's some grotesque incidents that are life-changing, generation changing. The lives of these innocent children and people are lost, and we're talking about them as if we're playing a card game of Go Fish. Like, what number do you have meets my number? So instead of a push or saying, you know, we need to reduce the fear because these have always been here, what ZeroNow and the Active Shooter Prevention Project have synergy in, and I mean not an inch of daylight between us, is there's a way to stop these. There's a way to prevent them, and there's a lot of techniques, and it's going to take that holistic view to do it, and a lot of buy-in to where we're just done having these. So really digressing back to the second point you made was, you know, what's the phenomena? Why is the phenomena here? I think we need to realize it's not just a phenomenon now, it's been a phenomenon for a long time, hundreds of years. And then part two, and which doesn't make it right, and then part two is the fear level. I average 135 people a year die at the hands of an active shooter. 135 too many. You will never get an argument out of me that's different. However, medical malpractice kills 251,000 people, 251,000 Americans every year. Heart disease, more than that. Cancer, more than that. Diabetes, more than that. You're talking about 1 million people a year by these 4 health-related incidents that are preventable by good diet, exercise, some medication, good quality doctors, access, and we haven't even gotten into opioids yet. Vis-a-vis 135 victims from active shooters. So we say, well, Chris, that's not a fair comparison, and I agree with you, or whoever would say that, because the 135 people didn't have a choice to change their health care, doctors, whatever. So I'm only using those 2 opinions, facts rather, because we need to turn the first, if we're going to solve the problem, we need to turn the temperature down on fear. We shouldn't be afraid of something that's not very likely, right? Walking down the street, we're not afraid of getting attacked by a shark. But if we go to the, you know, warm waters of wherever, our risk increases exponentially. Or we don't walk down the street on a sunny day and think lightning's going to strike. But if it's raining in a lightning storm, we stay out of the fields. So there's things we can do, just common sense. And the very first one is be prepared, not scared.
Yeah, you know, I totally take your point that there is a disproportionate amount of fear within the culture around mass shootings in regard to how many deaths they actually cause. They are certainly a rare phenomenon. However, they are also, I think, a uniquely American phenomenon, something that we have had to grapple with as a country for a very long time, more than other places. And I guess I'm just curious to hear your point of view on what can we do as a country that has been faced with this insurmountable tragedy throughout the years, and that has ramped up over the, you know, the recent 20 years as well after Columbine. What can we do as a country to come together and enact those common sense measures that you talk about?
The very first thing we have to do is understand where we're at. And it's true, we are disproportionate. We have a whole host of far too many, even where people don't die, where we have these mass shooting numbers, right? The problem with some of these thoughts are we run to our corners and we retreat into our fear, into our outrage, into our one sole solution, into our guns are the problem, into our if they only got mental health counseling, into the if you would just do something different. And we forget about self-accountability of just being kind to people, right? We know mental health illness is on the rise. We know that there's some critical things happening right now that increase the risk exponentially, but we don't address them. And instead, it's easier just to argue. And the political value of that arguing is so great, the politicians don't really want to solve the issue. And I don't mean that from a left perspective or a right perspective. I mean in fact. Okay? So we've had mass shootings in New Zealand, Australia, Norway, Japan. Anywhere that guns are illegal, there's been mass shootings recently. Not anywhere, but, you know, out of the top countries that people point to where gun control works, well, it's not working very well if you still have mass shootings. That's the first point. I am not an advocate of gun control, and I'm not an advocate against gun control. I'm simply saying We have to be neutral about the things that we can, in fact, focus on. The Second Amendment in the Constitution is whole for 73% of the country, I think the last poll was. 27% say it's not. Hey, until that's resolved, that's going to be its own issue. Because if it was just gun problems, the disproportionate number of Americans that own handguns, firearms, AR-15s, whatever nomenclature you want to use to describe that evil piece of equipment, the numbers are so disproportionate to the actual amount of shootings that happen, it doesn't base in fact. And that's not a Chris Grollnek thing. That's a Johns Hopkins University study, not the most conservative study. And it says there's no correlation between gun ownership and active shooters. So then you have other studies, conservative, left-wing, right-wing, independent, that talk about mental health and access to quality care, healthcare, mental health care, functions, things like that. And there's a disproportionate number of people that suffer from mental illness that we don't go address. Now, again, not a Chris Grollnek opinion. This is some data points that you can go, or your readers or listeners or watchers can go do on their own. Get in the car and drive down by some overpasses and see how many homeless encampments you find. Do you think those people are living in homeless encampments because it was a good idea to them in a stable environment? Probably not. Probably some help, and I'm not picking on them. I'm just saying, you go solve some of those problems, we solve some of the mental health problems. You start controlling gun sales and, gun show loopholes and background checks. And yes, we do all of those things, but we don't do them well. So maybe we shore that up. You go attack those two things and you're working on the giant problem, right? Now the phenomena. What are some contributing factors? I would challenge any one of your viewers to tell me that one of these 3 or 4 things aren't a contributing factor. The lockdowns, neither left or right, just a fact. People have been left alone, isolated, on their own, suicides up, opioid use is up, and opioid use is up so high that it was 81,000 overdosed by opioid abuse in 2020. 2021, it was 127,000. So we are now at this, and it might be 107,200 something, and then the estimate was off, and they came back with 127,000 overdosed by opioids. Those are legal pharmaceuticals, not heroin. Those are different stats, okay? Not cocaine, not methamphetamine, legal opioids. So maybe we need to look at those gun manufacturer laws and sales laws and mental health laws and opioid laws about sales and control and really look at what the diversion programs look like. Those are just societal issues. Now we know the lockdowns are happening. We know people are just lost in their own thought and generally upset. Again, another data point. Go to a restaurant and say, "Hi, how are you today?" and see what the response is. Very few people will smile. A lot of heads down, a lot of glum. The news cycles don't help, and there's not a lot of hope, right? So I just say be kind, right? Start being kind to people. And then finally, we need to offer hope and, not despair. But the music industry, the video game industry, social media industry, these aren't big culprits, but these are contributing factors that we know. There are 4 songs in the libraries of all the big companies, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube Music, whatever. 4 songs that shooters, and I won't tell you what they are because they're so prominent that shootings happen when the shooters listen to these songs and they idolize each other. And then they build a block on top of that and start saying, "Hey, I'm going to do better than this other person." And by better, I mean tragedy, right? And older people in a demographic, say 25 and above, commit more active shooters and retaliation things in their workplace because they feel wronged. School shooters either have a mental health issue and they want to be better than the last school shooter, or they hate everybody and they tell everybody they hate everybody and they tell everybody they're going to be a shooter, and yet they're still shooters. Finally, the video games are like video game trainers to teach. Hey, look, I can use a simulator to teach how to shoot a gun and score, quote unquote, score hits. One of the problems with that is, do we really want to be teaching people how to do that? And without violating their First Amendment right of doing whatever they want, right? So it's a balance, and we need to strike those balances with gun laws, mental health laws, opioid laws, common sense approach to music. And I've been asked this, well, those 4 songs, why don't you just take them off the air? And the answer is because there'll be 4 new songs tomorrow. So instead, get the artists together and do a mashup, do a collaboration, tell people what losers they are if they listen to these songs, right? I've got no data to support that, but what I am saying is people don't like being humiliated with their own thoughts, and maybe they're going to find something else. So I'm not sure that's a really good answer. It's an off-the-cuff remark. But the fact is, until we try something out of the box, we're going to be having this same conversation again and again and again.
Yeah, I think to that point, you see in American political discourse that we are obsessed with binaries and tribalism. So in the wake of one of these catastrophes, it's always, we need stricter gun laws, and no, we need, lesser gun laws, and guns help people. No, guns kill people, and all of this stuff. But I think what you point to is a more holistic approach, an approach that says we need to look at all policies, even if the policy seemingly has nothing to do with gun laws, something like how you mentioned homelessness or the opioid crisis. And I think that there are a lot of things that we can do in American society to bolster our mental health and to help people who maybe just feel so down on the world. So with that in mind, is there anything specific that you would like to see our politicians do the next time? And I hate to say the next time, but it feels at this point like an inevitability. But, if America ever has to grapple with this again, what would you like to see change in our political discourse on both the left and the right? What are some conversations that you want to see happen?
I'd like to back up for 1 minute, because that you're correct. It's not if, it's when, right? And we talked about gun violence in other countries that have zero gun laws, right? Or, zero tolerance gun laws. The knife attacks in those companies are exponentially higher than ours. And the reason is because access to firearms are crazy, right? So whether it's a good thing or bad thing, I'm not here to judge that or decide. I'm just saying we need to take a long, hard look at that policy. But if we just take away guns, it'll be another thing. It'll be a vehicle driving in somewhere into a crowd like the Wisconsin parade, or a knife attack like in Nice, France, with a truck associated with it. Getting right back down to your question, though, when it does happen again, politicians have the power of the purse. And this is not a sales thing. This is a holistic solution. And when people say, well, Chris, because this is what happens, right? I'm on TV after every shooting. And, one of the things I like to pat myself on the back for is I don't sell anything. I don't promote myself. I don't promote my business. And I refuse to work after that from calls and say, oh my gosh, I'm so scared. Because my motto is prepared, not scared. So I'll work with people, and we donate a lot of stuff. But the reason I get on there is because first, I want to give hope. Second, I want to, dissect the tragedy and realize that final point that I didn't bring up. Social media. Did you know that before 2022, it's called leakage. The FBI approximates 60% of all active shooters tell somebody they're going to be an active shooter, right? And we just don't listen. Whether it's in writing, like the Michigan shooter, whether it's in video, like the Parkland shooter, I could just go down and name them again, like Go Fish Game, right? Mm-hmm. So instead, what if social media can take on the role of public health officials with COVID and say, oh, visit COVID-19 for more health issues? That comment seems a little outdated when Chris says to Michael, oh my gosh, I'm going to kill you with a gun at school tomorrow morning. Social media might want to say, tag Michael, take this threat serious and please report it. Or Chris, you're not allowed to comment like that. We're going to delete your post. Or take the next step. Let's build a clearinghouse of an information database that actually shares information across all platforms, not just linear silos, right? Which is like see something, say something. So what would I say I'd like to see do? Those types of initiatives that aren't restrictive on your Fourth Amendment or the Constitution or a human. Let's get the human side back into it, right? Number 2, be kind. Number 3, promote honesty. You cannot say, and I'm going to give you an example, because everything I say, I try to back up with facts. I have an interview I did on BBC the World News. It set all sorts of records, not because I was on it, because the topic was tragic, and it was after Uvalde. And normally I don't speak about school shootings, so and people know that. So I think they tuned in to hear what I had to say, but not just about me. But this is in London. I was in an argument simply saying you don't understand American culture from what their position was, right? And what their position was, just simply remove all the guns and you're fine. Well, people don't understand there's people in the country that will never give up their firearms.
That's right.
I'm not talking about me or you or anybody else. I'm just saying there are subsets of people that believe it's an inherent right, that it's a birthright. So, being born in America, being a citizen. So I would just say caution against that, move to the honesty, and look at an example of how to fix this. And if you'll indulge me for about 5 minutes, I can tell you what that example is.
Yeah, I would love that, and I think a lot of people listening would love that too.
So I think the number one thing to answer your question, or come back, full circle back to my dissertation, if you will. We haven't lost a child in a school fire in 64 years. Okay? Now, schools have caught on fire. Kids have died in fires. People have died in fires. But we've not lost a child in a school fire in 64 years. Why is that? Quick, out of the box, quick answer from Michael. What do you think the reason is?
Oh, I would say probably more modernization in technology and fire alarm systems and sprinkler systems and various preventative measures that made it so that's not possible.
Sure. And when you talk to somebody that's, maybe not as bright as you, but maybe me, which I'm not that bright, we're going to reduce it to something simple. Americans got tired of losing children in school fires. And some really smart people got together. And I'd ask your viewer, go ask their children, their nieces, nephews, co-workers, kids, whatever. Hey, what do you do if you catch on fire? You stop, drop, and roll. So we, in 2012, came out and said, hey, we got a good idea. Let's come up with these 3 words, a catchphrase. It's called what? Run, hide, fight. So here's the difference. When you stop, drop, and roll and smoke is pouring in, we know that you get low, crawl out, and escape the building. We also got tired that, hey, other than that, we're going to populate stop, drop, and roll, the phenomena of schools catching on fire and killing kids, by more red trucks that say fire engine, firefighters, fire prevention officers, arson investigators, fire inspectors, hydrants, fire extinguishers, sprinklers, like you said, exit signs, nomenclature, training, fire drills. We become comfortable talking about fires. It's no longer scary. We teach our children that it's okay to be, fire is okay, just don't light yourself on fire. And then we don't go light them on fire to tell them fire is hot. So there's no way that we should simulate gunshots to let them know active shooters are bad. What we need to do is find the middle. And I, propose that I think we found the middle. I think we found a great solution that, building codes came out for fire protection. And it costs approximately $15 million per building for a school. That's if you have a campus and you want to build one building. That's about $15 million across the country. And we're using Texas numbers, but they extrapolate correctly. So I propose that, say, we can active shoot, because that's called fireproofing your school, right? They still burn down. So they're not perfect, but they're not having fires that take the lives. So what I'm suggesting is, how about active shooter proof your school? Maybe use a different word. Maybe get a politician that says, oh my gosh, we could really do that. Because right now, the Active Shooter Prevention Project, this is what we're doing. And it's a whole host of things. It's like 8 things that you can do that you reduce the risk so exponentially that even the brightest minds in tactical aggression, so like members of the FBI HRT teams, they couldn't create an active shooter event as if you plug in these things. So they're tactically sound, where they study events like this and say, oh my gosh, this is the most grotesque thing. We have to rescue hostages from this, right, from this event. They can't recreate the event after looking at the model that we've put in place. So My suggestion is take run, hide, fight, and populate it. Number 2, education from a standpoint. Something that a lot of ours viewers probably know from ZeroNow, and ZeroNow viewers are aware of because they've heard me speak about it. It's like I call it my soapbox P's. They're quadrants, okay? If I come and talk to Michael with police tactics in mind, I'm purely talking about response. And I'm talking about prevention through response. The faster I respond, the less lives that will be lost. So I got to telling you in 2012 or 2010, I'm like, you know what? I think we can prevent these things, and now we can just prevent them from happening. And although prevention is hard to measure, there's no reason we shouldn't, strive to obtain it. So talk to the first P, which is the people. That's me, you, our families, our friends, and everybody watching this. Those are the would-be victims. These events happen in 0 to 8 minutes. The average event takes an officer 8 minutes to get there. So who's the first responder? Us. What are we going to do? Do I really want my child, or do I want my friend Michael or anybody to go fight a person with a firearm with a pencil? No. So fight is not a really good one, right? Hide. Do we want to hide under a desk? Well, I can show you pictures at Columbine and many other schools with a lot of dead kids under them because they hid under desks just like we told them to. Desks are not impenetrable by bullets. Run. Good, we told them to run. Where are they running to? Most of the kids, I can tell you, in the run patterns have run into the gunfire. I just went backwards from run, hide, fight. So I am proposing that you can take that run, hide, fight, populate it, do an assessment at the school, see where their weak points are, good points are, train the executives to understand what they're learning, train the staff of what the executives have bought off on, train the police based off what the executives, the community, and the staff want, then go in with a whole host of things like, number 1, this thing called Awareness, right? And yeah, it's a plug, but I don't own the company. I believe in it. It's a clearinghouse where it gets all that information out of the silos and brings it to the top. That's real prevention. Then say OmniAlert, right? Number 1 solution out there for notification system, mass notification. Blue lights flashing, panic buttons pushed, everything's locked down. Well, what if you don't know you need to push that button? What if that blue light's not flashing? Why wait? They have gun detection software through artificial intelligence that says someone is in a gun-denied zone, say 100 yards out from that school, and they're walking towards that school with a gun out and they have purpose. That can automatically trigger a lockdown, and now OmniAlert goes into full effect, right? You have these barriers, windshield, one of a kind, patented, not patent pending, patented, trademark. Nothing exists like it. It's impenetrable. And they're mobile devices that look like a whiteboard, and they go up against the door, and they lock into place, and they're fire code compliant. Every child in that room or human in the room can hide behind in that room now, and they won't get shot through a door because it's impenetrable. Then you put in something called Amber Box. Amber Box is like a shot detection system where a gunshot has now gone off, different than a gun detection software that says, hey, there's a gun present. Now it's a shot detection system that says, hey, there's a gunshot. It reduces it down to a couple meters, tells the police right where it is, and it makes a phone call to the police department in 0.37 seconds. During a real active shooter, it takes me or you 5 minutes to call the police. So if we can reduce those numbers, now we get police on scene earlier and stop the shooting, right? And we're already barricaded in the classrooms with windshield, nobody can get us. And we've already notified everybody because we had OmniAlert. And we already knew this was probably going to happen because we had Awareness. We know where the place is going to be that's going to be the target of the person. And we had the assessment and the training so everyone knows what to do. And it's like one begets the next begets the next. And I never thought I would have to be on TV, your show, writing, whatever, reminding people to lock doors. But after Uvalde, we have to reduce this to the lowest common term and roll the message out that says, here's what we do. So those are just some facts, and there's grant writing components in there to go win grants and go. But you take the initiative and you get these things put into your schools. I've got professionals that can't beat the system that we just built, and it cost. Here's the best part, okay? 'Cause this is not for your viewers, but so they understand. This isn't just like if we all had money, we could X, Y, Z, right?
Right.
Building a school to fire code costs $15 million for one building. What I just outlined, maybe $350,000.
Wow. Yeah.
Where's the big light bulb that says, "Hey, let's do this," right? And
Right.
I'm not talking about my system. There's other systems, but nothing that puts together this onion, if you will, the layered onion principle that says, hey, why cry in the first place? Don't cut the onion.
Mhm. And Chris, from my point of view, I think it's because the conversation in this country has been saturated by such polarization and by such binaries that we aren't even able to have these really great discussions and pull back and say, wait a second, while we're talking about the prospect of taking guns away from law-abiding citizens, which we both know is never going to happen in America, let's table that conversation and have a conversation like the one that we just had, where we have real, tangible solutions that can save lives. So I really appreciate you outlining this for us. I think our viewers are really going to love it. And finally, I would love to get your perspective on how we can have more of these conversations, how we can lower the temperature within the political discourse on this issue and talk about these things that can actually make a real world difference.
I think there's 3 ways, and I'm glad you asked that question. It's not like I'm the shell answer man that has all the answers, but I only study this. This is all I do, right? One is just simply be kind, right? We have to practice. We have to practice being kind, and that's sad. But I'm just as human as you, and you're just as human as the next person. And you and I know that when we go into a fast food restaurant and we get upset that our order's not right, we simply need to go up and exchange it. But when that's not happening and we're in a hurry and the kids are crying, there's something else going, that stress comes in and you became angry. Anger begets anger, right? And then we lose track of that human thing. And we see the people back there don't care about my problems and I don't care about their problems. And if they only knew how hard it was to be me and I only knew how hard it was to be them. But really, we're us, right? We're society. So practice being kind. Number 2, we have to take a long, hard look at, is it time for a national conversation to make an active shooter standard? I outlined the fire prevention strategies. They're more than strategies, they're standard. You can't build a school that's not fire code. That's why we looked at the holistic view of the active shooter response plan, prevention plan, option plan, right? PRO, prevention response option plans, from the lens of a fire. And I'm going to tell you the third thing, we have to listen to each other. So people call me daily and tell me why I'm wrong, what I'm wrong about, and I love it because it helps me evaluate, hey, you know what, maybe I need to relook at that. Can't take it personal, just need to take the common feedback. However, when people hear Chris's spiel about, oh, the fire model, well, that will never work. I just told you how it will. I understand that there's ways that it might not here or there, but there's other solutions. It's not a sole source. But if we don't make this a national standard, Michael, we're not serious about stopping these. Period. Full stop.
Yeah, I think that that's 100% true, and I think that you have clearly thought deeply and critically on this issue, and I just want to thank you for taking the time to share your insights with us at ZeroNow, and I really appreciate having you on tonight.
I'm humbled by the ZeroNow initiative, by being part of it, and everything you guys do. So whatever I can do, please reach out. Thank you so much.